are live. Welcome to the RG DFS Tournament Takes podcast. I am your host, Chris Kirkwood, screen name Kirk D's. A little bit light here in the booth this week, missing one of our co-hosts, Brett, who's off vacationing with his family. I think he's visiting his brother in Florida, so the best to him. He's already had COVID, so I guess he doesn't have to worry about that. But here with my other co-host, the number one DFS player in Canada, back again to join us on the pod. Toe Tag and Tambo, Tyler Tamboline. We're back for week 10. How's it going, my man?
I'm good, man. We don't need Brett when we got the number one Canadian DFS player in the world, in Canada. Geez, man. Certainly doesn't feel that way. I'd love for a week to go my way here that something happened. Golf right now. Got a few sweats out there. Certainly not the best day losing EVR in my $4,500 mega, but that is one of the worst things that could happen. So that's the way it goes sometimes. I do have some other good sweats, so hopefully by the end of the weekend, at least something to talk about. If not, though, do it with football. So, yeah, good to be back, man. It's crazy that it's week 10 already, though. That's, the year's just flying by right now.
Indeed. How'd you make out last week?
Not the greatest, I would say. A couple errors, maybe they're errors. I don't know. Nothing you can really do about it, but it just sucks when Justin Jackson was in a couple of my best lineups there, and he was, injured on the first play or whatever it was. There was some back and forth speculation whether it was warm-ups or the first play or whatever. It just was, regardless, it was brutal, so that one hurt. Not enough Locke, Judy, Luton, Chark stacks, things that, really in the tournaments that I'm playing, those are the ways that you needed to go to get to the very top, and had some of them, but not enough of them. So hoping that this week's a little bit different. And this week feels like a pretty chalk week. So how did you do last week?
I did well overall. I won money, which is always nice, but I had a good week on Yahoo because I had Dalvin Cook over there. Could have been a fantastic week, but I had Connor and Edmonds as my last two running backs, but I still did very well. I had all the right receivers and whatnot, but on DK, I was crushing, except I didn't have Dalvin Cook. But I basically had, all the best wide receivers. I mean, I had like McLaurin. I don't even remember. I had Judy. Anyway, I was like looking like a lock to like take down a ton of tournaments, and because I was sitting on Edmonds and Connor, who I just needed just normal games from, and then James Conner wasn't used whatsoever, so that was disheartening. I was also like 20 points out of first in the Wildcat with a lineup with Justin Jackson left, and so I lost him there, so that was bad. So it was like, it was still good. I still had a profitable week, but it felt like I just left so much on the table from run bad at those 4:00 games. But and so then I dumped. I was on Tilt and dumped a bunch in Showdown, and then I dumped some more in golf, PGA for the Masters, which I didn't want to play. And man, screw you, Kokrak. But here we are, week 10. Trying to get over it, so now I'm going to be firing this weekend. This weekend definitely seems all about chalk. So I was, just running through the slate. We've got our slate of games, 11 games this week, but there's just one game that just looks so much better than the rest, at least to me. I mean, it's like hard to avoid. So we start off with the Bills, who everybody knows that basically there's two flags I plant over and over every single week on this podcast, and it's Josh Allen and it's Kyler Murray for the quarterback positions. And now they're playing each other. So how do I not like this game? Especially when Brown looked really good last week with Allen looked really good with Brown last week, who looked healthy, and I had him all over the place last week. So 56-point game total, but that game's going to get so much ownership. So it'll be interesting to hear from you how we're going to attack this. And then we've got like mega running back chalk with Mike Davis, who's just mispriced at the minimum because they thought McCaffrey was going to be back. And some other running back chalk. But other than that, Buffalo, Arizona game, we do have some other spots. So, we definitely have, we always look for a Seattle game, right? Like on the slate, and we've got Seattle on the road to the Rams. And that game has a 54.5 point total. And some interesting news has popped up there is who's out in the Shaq Griffin is out for the Seahawks. So their secondary is just even thinner than usual. And, they're a good run defense anyways.
Yeah.
So that's I'm definitely looking at some Rams pass catchers, but like Cooper Kupp's injury is a little bit worrisome, but maybe that'll lighten some ownership there. Other than that game, there's the Raiders just always seem to come through for like a good game script. Raiders and the Broncos. That game could be interesting with a 51-point total. We got our man Justin Herbert again, who's balling with Keenan Allen. This time traveling to Miami, take on the Dolphins, 48. Then we have Tom Brady, who just looked absolutely atrocious against the Saints, heading to in a get right spot, heading into Carolina. That game is a 50.5-point total. And he has got a whole arsenal of weapons now. Hopefully another week of game planning and practice with Antonio Brown. And he's going to be looking to try to put up some points in that one. Other than that, there's Washington, Detroit Lions in the Dome. There's Green Bay, who's close to a 2-touchdown favorite against the Jags, at home. And what else we got? We've got Giants, Eagles, some interesting plays there. And Browns, Texans. There's a chalky running back for sure. I guess there's some weather concerns again in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yep. I don't know. How's it looking to you?
I'm with you. I get it. And like you said, it's kind of funny. It actually is true. Your guys, Allen versus Kyler. It's just what you've been waiting for all season. So I'm sure you'll be all over those game stacks. I think the one thing with that is that it is like, just looking at it now, it looks like almost 30% of the ownership on the slate is leading to that game. Maybe it goes more by game time. So there's some other ways you can go. One you didn't. I like a lot of the ones you did mention. I'll hit on that in a second. But one you didn't mention that I kind of like as sort of an interesting game is one of the later games, and it's Bengals versus the Steelers. Joe Burrow should be coming from behind. He likes to throw it like about 50 times a game. So I don't mind that game. There's some plays in there. Pittsburgh's been clicking lately. Definitely with you on Seattle against the Rams, but I'm more on the Russell Wilson side than I am some of this Goff talk that I'm hearing out there. So I'll go with that. I don't mind that one. Herbert versus Tua. Super excited for that game. Tua showed something last week. Herbert's been on fire. So getting those two teams together with like a 48.5, 49 total, whatever, that's looking pretty attractive. Carr versus Locke is, one of those games where it just feels like it's going to suck, but also at the same time, because everyone thinks like that, it's like when you get that Thursday Island game that everyone says is going to be absolutely terrible, then it just ends up shooting out. That's the sort of game that I could see happening there between those two guys. And the only other one that I really like that you mentioned, the other ones have pieces, Green Bay, Washington, Detroit, those ones. The other one that I like, and you called it, is the get right spot for Tom, the Tampa Bay Bucks, man, bring them back. They got a week fresh of Antonio Brown. So many guys that, Evans, Godwin, Gronk, Brown, just that whole offense going against Carolina. When that game has the biggest chalk piece of the entire slate, there has to be a way we can work this in and make this happen. So, that's the one I'm excited to talk about as well for one of the morning games there.
Yep. All right. So this is going to be really interesting. So it's good that we start with the running back position this week, because we've got to at least discuss how we're going to approach Mike Davis and what we're going to do. He's min price. He's Bonifon looks like he's going to be out again. So he's pretty much all they got. He's definitely workload, gets a monster workload, utilized in the passing game, has been coming off of 3 straight complete duds. 2 of them, or one of them, which was a good matchup, but 2 of them that were tougher matchups with KC and New Orleans, but still 3 poor performances in a row. But he's min price, right? So I know, like, I guess there's two ways to even discuss this, but like, there's one like single entry tournaments and smaller field stuff. What do we do? And then there's like large field stuff, like the Millionaire Maker, the Wildcat, and what do we do there? Like one versus the other. How are you leaning, at least at this point? Like, what's your how are you going to approach tournaments with Mike Davis this week?
It's just so bad, the pricing, man. Like it's like you said, it's pretty obvious if you're in something, higher dollar, smaller entry. It's you know how you could leverage a field is go off them, but I think the optimal play is just to put them in there, right? You plug them in. The challenges for something like the Millie Maker, I don't think. But even then, I don't know. I was gonna get your take. I know you're the host and kicked it to me right away. But the thought process for me is this. Then you can have the rebuttal, I guess. Is that I've seen in the past where some really strong tournament players will just jam them all in, lock button it, and then start getting different in their stacks and other ways around it. And then I've seen guys completely fade it and just say the obvious, if you know he's going to be 50% or 40%, then that's just the play is to fade it. So you can look at it those two ways. It's really hard to pick the third way, but I have seen where some people do 75%, not go all the way, and then leave that 25% open and make sure the lineups that he's in are sort of the wacky stacks, a little bit more, unique stacks. And then in lineups that, they're building without him, they'll do it in a sense where they'll, pay up, use like a Josh Allen, John Brown, whereas most people will be on Josh Allen and Diggs with Mike Davis. They would go Josh Allen, Brown, and use Mike, use them in that or something like that. Not use them in that because they want it to be different at the $4,000 spot or the cheaper spot in a wide receiver position, and then pay up at running back. So that's the three ways. I think, at least one of them is bad, but what's your thoughts on how to use them in something like the Millie Maker or even the $9 slant that we typically max every week?
I was thinking about this. I think it's correct to be underweight for sure in the large field stuff. I'm more the way I was more thinking about like having more issues about because I have more of my action in kind of the higher stakes like single entry stuff or smaller field stuff that I like to play. That's where I'm thinking like everyone's probably just gonna just play them and just have one less spot to worry about.
Yeah.
But I think in the large field stuff, I think the correct answer is you should be underweight. Now you could fade him completely, but I think that's kind of dangerous in its own right. But like realistically, what's his upside in this matchup against Tampa Bay, who's really good against the run, third in DVOA against the run, and after three straight underwhelming performances? I mean, what do you if you had to like I know we look at median projections, ceiling projections and whatnot, but what do you honestly think that he probably puts up in a game like this?
It's tough to say. This is the thing. You mentioned it though. CMC out, Bonifon likely out. If you go back to the earlier part of the season, a lot of what he was getting was, 9 targets, 6 targets, 10 targets. He even got 6 targets against the Chiefs. So there's that, and they're all pretty good. He's catching these balls. So that's, 5, 6, 7 points right there, plus the yardage, call it 10, whatever he does with it, that's 10 points just like that on just that. And now he gets some attempts. I know it's an extremely, tough matchup, but all year we've seen some tough matchups get beat. I think it could just be a check down fest. And, the more I think about it out loud and the more, you say that and just, doubling down on the thoughts is, yeah, probably just go way underweight. Do the opposite of what I said of, the overweight stands, do it underweight. And the ones you use them in, just make sure you're using them correctly, but just go elsewhere. There's a lot of other plays that we'll get into, guys that we can like. There's more injuries to come or, things that could possibly pop up that we'll talk about. There's game scripts that you could play out, like something in the Packers game, as we'll talk about after, where maybe that runs out a little bit differently than most think. So, yeah, I'll probably go underweight and just use them in some of the lineups where I need that value there, and I have a unique stack already. That's pretty much how I'm looking at it after talking through it with you.
Yeah, and I mean the thing we do know too is that the Bucks do give up a bunch of targets to opposing backs. That that's just because they shut down so much of the straight running up the middle. There a lot of the target share for these teams have come through the running back pass, and we know that they're going to want to use Mike Davis, and so unlike DraftKings, that just makes it just seems like he's a lock for I mean, like you were throwing out like 6 targets, 5, 6. It seems like that's a lock. Like, and
Yeah.
he's probably going to catch those. So that's like 5 or 6 points in like that's without any production whatsoever. And if he finds the end zone, then he's just completely pays off.
That's the challenge, right? It sounds like 8 to
Yeah.
10 is like his floor. And so you're like at 4K, 8 to 10 is that. It's just, do you think he has a way to a ceiling here? Because if he does,
So the
then
thing is,
you got to
like,
change your stand.
and then those lineups we're going to be able to fit in like the higher priced wide receivers. So I guess a function of this
Right.
will be what we really think about the higher priced receivers, and if we can beat them with like a mid range wide receivers, and then because if you
Yeah.
feel confident you can, then we should be able to pivot around at running backs and look for some more upside. But I hear you; it's a tough decision. Other than that, I mean, there's another guy. There's who's going to end up getting a lot of ownership now because David Johnson's been ruled out as Duke Johnson. He should be pretty popular. It just makes it. I mean, he could be a natural pivot from Mike Davis, but like so many lineups are going to be that combo together. But
Right.
you get the little revenge narrative back in Cleveland against a team that didn't utilize him enough. Um, but
The weather you talked about, if they want to check it down or use them in that sense more because of that, there's a reason they could go to that.
Yep. So that he's an interesting one. Then other than that, we've got I mean, how do you not like Aaron Jones? So like Aaron Jones in his first game back, where we weren't really sure about his health. We thought they might have a lighter load for him. He still got 15 rushing attempts in that game. He didn't find the end zone, which he likes to do. But and also it was a tough matchup against San Francisco. But now he's had 10 days off because of the Thursday night game, the last one. So he should be all ready to go in this one, and facing the Jags as 2 touchdown favorites. And yes, the Jags are absolutely pathetic against the pass. I think they're dead last. They are dead last in DVOA versus the pass. 21st in the run. They're bad everywhere. But and Aaron Rodgers is absolutely going to be able to do what he wants through the passing game, but it just seems as 2 touchdown favorites, it just makes a lot of sense to feed this guy. And I think he's definitely getting or at least one rushing touchdown in this game. I would say so. I mean, it's hard not to like him, and his price is so favorable, at least for like a top end stud, right? Like 7,100 as opposed to like the 8,200 for Alvin Kamara. Um, I don't know. I like Aaron Jones a ton. You have to like Kamara too as well, although it's a tougher rushing matchup. There are some reasons that you can make the case to fade Kamara. He'll be pretty popular with Michael Thomas now being back and Drew Brees looking good through the pass. And Emmanuel Sanders healthy again, so he's got all their pass options plus Taysom. Hill had a lot of usage in the last game. So there's and Latavius Murray always can eat into that. So there are a case to be made to fade Kamara. And then from there, there's guys like, man, it would just crush me. I might have to do it anyway to go back to James Conner when he just crushed
Yeah.
my soul and Pittsburgh didn't use him whatsoever. But now another great matchup against Cincinnati. And then I don't know. There's and Miles Sanders. Like that's kind of like the top plays, at least for me at the moment. But there's also guys like Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, Leonard Fournette. Fournette's cheap. If he's the clear back, which it's looking like now, and I was kind of wrong, but because I was so high on Ronald Jones a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't sure how much Fournette would eat into it. But fumbles certainly didn't help Jones's case. But Fournette looks to be the lead guy now. So that's another option. But like, how are you, what are you making out of this whole, like all those guys that I just mentioned?
I actually like the Connor call that you mentioned. I know it's tough to probably go back to it. I did mention that game off the hop when you were reading them off there. I think that's how they get it done on their side. I think they go back to him because of last week. I think, most people will definitely be off of him. And now it's, he's healthy and ready to go. Why not just pound him out there against a division game, division rival in Cincinnati? So I like that. The worry for me with Jones, I think a lot of people are liking him. They're coming around. His ownership is now creeping up there. A couple things. I guess I don't want to go, a word salad here, but with Aaron Jones, 30% ownership is what we're seeing right now. But then we're also seeing 30% on Devontae Adams. But we're not seeing the ownership on Aaron Rodgers. He's at 7%. And Devontae Adams is $9,000. So here's the thing. If you remember back to the start of the season, we had this situation with like Dak, Amari, and Zeke. And it's not how it actually played out. They don't all get played. No one's really playing Jones and Adams together or anything like that. So I actually think way more people go to the Jones side here. I like the Rodgers Adams being more expensive and ways you can get around it and fit it and do it. If you want to go back to that Mike Davis conversation we just had, that would be a way I would get to it. I don't really trust the 30% ownership at 9,000 right now. I think it could come in lower. And then, just because it's easier to fit, and there's way more wide receivers when we get to that position that we'll talk about. But the last part on Aaron Jones is just that we've seen him in some of these favorable matchups, even before his injury. You look at it, Atlanta, 22 points, but he's 7,100. New Orleans, 16, Minnesota, 17. He has a lot of like 17 and 19-point games sprinkled in amongst like a 48 against the Lions or 25, 32, those sort of games. So the challenge I have with that is that there's other guys around him. And I also worry you get guys like Williams right there. Jamal Williams is 4K. I think he's a great tournament play because I think what are they, 14-point favorites or something in this game? So, that to me, I think it's real. It's against Luton. I think it's a way you could go about it. You could use the Green Bay defense, expect that they get out early, and then Jamal Williams just goes all game because Jamal Williams was already cutting in to Aaron Jones before the injury. Now, yes, against a team like Detroit, he got there on half the snaps. But if you look at the game against Atlanta, when he put up 20 points, which was a great matchup, kind of like I think about this one, Jamal Williams still had almost 19 fantasy points himself. And now we're talking about $4,000 versus 7,100. So long way of saying it, but I do like, maybe I'm eating up Brett's airtime since we don't have him this week, but I do like Jamal Williams in tournaments as a way to be a little bit different and just sink to that next level versus just going to Rodgers and Adams as a way to level up because I do like him there. Other than that, I'm with you on Connor, who we just talked about. You mentioned, don't know about Kamara yet. I'm coming around a little bit more on him if this is what the ownership's going to look like, but I think Kamara still is getting some ownership. And then I like Josh Jacobs. I don't know if you still like your boy Big Game James this week in that same matchup. I feel like we're on the Green Bay side so heavy that he might not be a part of it. But I like running backs against Denver in general. I think he's got a good floor, high ceiling, $6,500. They've learned to use him a little bit more in the passing game this season. And then Miles Sanders as well, right below. Not sure your thoughts as we get down into this range, but who do you like here, Kirkwood?
Yeah, so I like James Robinson. I always like him. I mean, the guy's just a baller, right? So he got 25 rushing attempts last week, even, with Chris Thompson, definitely ate into some of the passing game stuff, but he's there. He did get 2 targets, and he is an option. It's probably more of a function of quarterback at this point, which is the problem, but like still a monster workload. Green Bay has just been atrocious against the run. That's the way that you can get a lot of fantasy production. So 20th in DVOA versus the run. So I do like that call. I also so I do worry on that with Aaron Jones. I do worry about Williams eating in, but like I just know the upside this guy can have, and when he goes off, right? Like we've just flashed back to that game against Detroit, and like if he's eating those touchdowns, then which he's certainly capable of doing in this game, it could just be a monster game for him. So I like him, but Miles Sanders is a guy that you just mentioned that I like a lot. So all set to return now against the Giants. When he's healthy, he dominates snaps. He ranks 7th in targets per game for running backs, which should certainly come into play this week as the Giants have allowed the most targets to running backs so far this season. So you have to like that PPR upside if he's going to get the monster workload. I think we should assume that he will go back to his like 75% snap share that he was seeing before, but there is that worry that Boston Scott, with how decent he's played, could eat into that. But I'm approaching it like this is the guy that like he was a a top 10 or top 11 season long pick to start the season. Best ball pick. Like everyone had monster hopes for him. He just injuries has held him back. But and since the very beginning of the season. But if he's all set now, I'm just going to approach it like that and hope that he gets lower ownership than he should. So he's someone I definitely like. Let's see, who else was it? Josh Jacobs. Man, it worries me because he's like all game script, right?
Typically,
And
yep.
Denver's good against the run. Now, so I'm not sure, and it's like he's just not getting much usage, at least the last 2 weeks, certainly in the passing game. Can he get there and have a big game? Yes. Like, am I? Who would I choose between like him? That range is real interesting because I prefer Miles Sanders there. I prefer James Robinson. I even prefer going up to James Conner, and that should say something because I don't want to play this guy ever again after what he did to me last week. And then from there, or I would probably prefer to just go down to Leonard Fournette and hope that maybe this is a game where he gets utilized in the passing game for more checkdowns and or has a lot of success on the ground, which most teams certainly do against Carolina. So, man, there are a lot more options than it seems. So so let's just start comparing prices, right? Like, so we do have options other than Mike Davis, like for a little bit higher, right? So like Duke, we already
Oh
said
yeah.
Duke Johnson is 5K, but like Leonard Fournette's 5,500. It's not that hard to make that switch. DeAndre Swift, who's been electric, but yeah, Adrian Peterson and whoever the heck they just give carries to is tilting. But like, and Patricia loves to run. They're definitely their most electric back, more so than Peterson or Carry On. Has been utilized in the passing game. Got 5 targets last week. Which is probably where they'll need to use him more against that tough front of Washington. So plus it's in the dome there. So like he could absolutely beat Mike Davis. Antonio Gibson is another guy that could absolutely beat Mike Davis up to for 1,600 more. I mean, but I know that's like a big difference in salary, but it's not that hard if you just like take a little bit off of one of the higher end receivers when you're making your builds, which there are certainly options to do. So the more I think about it, the more I think that there's ways that we can definitely beat Mike Davis this week.
The more I think about it, the more I think about a full fade. After all these options we just talked about, it's just like I don't even know if I need them. You just talked about it. A couple guys down there that I like that you mentioned were Swift. I'm with you on that one. There's some other things to come into play. One last thing I'll say on Jacobs, and against the Denver D, didn't play anybody. If you go look at their schedule, when in a touchdown, this is just a team that doesn't see a lot. So I actually think that game script could be with a guy like Jacobs. So, I'll stick with that. But then we got the injuries too. I know we're spending a lot of time here, but this is just to show you guys because I think Mike Davis is a big talking point this week. Joe Mixon's doubtful. You got Giovanni Bernard in that game. Chris Carson still didn't practice today, and Hyde was limited as well. DJ Dallas back down there at 5,100. You mentioned DeAndre Swift, who I like. You mentioned Leonard Fournette, Antonio Gibson. Both guys, one of those guys in that game goes off, I think, between Gibson and Swift. So I like both of those plays. Duke Johnson's right there, as you mentioned. I forget what I saw on Wayne Gallman, but I don't think they've got much on the go here this week. And he didn't look that bad. Last couple of weeks, he's putting up 16, 13, and 15 for DK points, and he's way down at 4,500. So I think that's another guy that you could try out. And Singletary maybe in those game stacks, right? Just as a way to be different. It's, got to be off a catch and run again or something like that, but not as high on him as the others. I'm just pointing out again, there's a lot of guys in these ranges that you can use.
Yeah, and one last guy that I'll mention too is Jerick McKinnon. Basically, the tired legs mantra is over. At least looked to be over that last week, as he got 12 carries, 52 yards, got 4 targets. But they're sitting everybody again this week. So Mostert, Coleman, both out this week. So really it's just Jermichael Hasty and what you think of him and McKinnon. And they're probably not going to have much success running through the tackles against the Saints typically, and probably are going to need the passing work that McKinnon brings to the table and that explosiveness in this game. So he's only 5,600 now. Certainly that's GPP and boomer bust, right? Like he could definitely bust for sure, but like I could take a chance with him in this one. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like him, and they always, the thing about him was when they first got him, they wanted to use him a bunch, got injured right away. I know Shanahan loves him, so I'm in on McKinnon over trying to take a shot with Hasty, but so I'm with you on that one. I guess one more for you though, it just came to mind before we move on to quarterback, but do we go? We got to wait on the Drake news, of course, but what about going back to Edmonds? He still got 66 out of 69 snaps last week and 25 carries and just burned everybody. So what about going back to him in that game, or at least in game stacks there? Do you think that make it a little bit different when everyone's on the passing game, or do you think people will find that out, and if Drake's out, just gravitate there anyway?
So here's my thoughts, right? So I like the idea. The usage is certainly there. He was a good play last week, right? Like he just busted. He just didn't have a good game. 25 rushing attempts. You take that all day against Miami. The problem is I felt really stupid last week for being so confident with him, because I was like, you just can't be confident in playing a running back next to Kyler Murray, because Kyler Murray is the running back number one on that team, right? Like, so Kyler Murray is basically, he's on pace for over 1,000 yards rushing and 16 rushing touchdowns, which
He has
is
8
on
rushing touchdowns. It's insane.
Yeah. And so if you pace that out, like he'll have over 1,000 yards and 16 rushing touchdowns, on pace to break Cam Newton's 14 rushing TD record when he was MVP. So I just felt really dumb. Like, and I was just like, but like the game could break that way, it could be that he has success and he punches it in the end zone. But I'm not in love with him. Plus Kenyon Drake's a game time decision now, so that would certainly muddy the waters as well if he's back and playing. So that'll be news to stay on. But let's assume Drake is out again. I think he's a good play, but like I'm skeptical because it's just like Kyler is just such a rushing threat down there, and it's just like but for large field GPPs and making your stacks in a way to play that game differently, absolutely, right? Like, will I make lineups that play the game that way, that have Josh Allen to Diggs and come back with Edmonds? Yes, I will. Like, because that's a way to play it. Do I like it better personally than playing Kyler in the passing game options like Kirk or Hopkins? No, I don't. But certainly it's worth the play. I guess so. Is that should we just go into quarterback now, since we started talking about Kyler?
It's a great segue, yeah. And it's funny too. I just looked it up because I was like, 8. I forgot he had 8. I've been seeing all the stats all week. They've been flashing up Cam Newton. You just mentioned his MVP season. They flashed up Lamar Jackson's MVP season last year. Everything these guys were doing, and then you got Josh Allen, 5 of his own, right, rushing TDs on top of these big games, these 33, 39-point DK fantasy games. So it's crazy. This game is one that is very interesting to talk about, just because it's like, you can't leave these guys out. I think that's way too aggressive. It's how do you play these guys and be different with them? And that's what I'm going to be thinking about, building groups on Lineup HQ, doing stuff like that to try and find a way just to think about what's going to be different, how you can build your lineups differently this weekend to hopefully beat some of this and leverage up. So what are your thoughts with your 2 boys? Because I know those guys that you've been talking about all season together, and now they're playing each other.
I love them. So like me, I may just decide to just like jam everything with Kyler and Josh Allen and not play any other quarterbacks, which I know is dumb. And I'm probably going to there's probably going to be some other quarterback that goes off, whether it's Justin Herbert or somebody that like breaks the slate at lower ownership, and Deshaun Watson, perhaps, Aaron Rodgers. I'll play some Aaron Rodgers, because like I don't really want to play much Devontae without Aaron Rodgers. So, because it's just like I'm going to separate those two. Like I'm going to have more of Aaron Jones, number one, like, cause I like him. Number two, if I have Adams, the way I see him absolutely getting there is with Aaron Rodgers coming along for the ride. And even though there's really not many other pass catching options besides Adams there, but that's just the way I'll end up playing it. So I'll play some Aaron Rodgers, but like, I just want to, like, these are my two guys. So like I said, Kyler, like just on pace to have absolutely monster year, right? And then so Cardinals games, they average over the last 4 weeks have averaged the most combined plays per game over the last 4 weeks, right? So we're getting an uptick in plays. Josh Allen probably, well, I don't think it even matters either way. Like, one of these teams is going to get out to a lead, right? Whether it's Kyler or Josh Allen. Josh Allen plays better with the lead, number one. But they're going to have to hurry. Like, both of these teams love to just hurry up and get their guys going. They love to get rushing yards. So it's like Kyler is definitely the one that rates out better because he's at home. I probably like Josh Allen even better. But like, they're both amazing plays to me. So I'm just going to plant my flag. I'm probably going to end up going just all in on these two, but I know that that's not like the right thing to do, but it's like these are my guys. So I feel like I have to. But the thing with Kyler, right? He's getting better. Yeah. He's getting better with his passing. I mean, he's getting more comfortable with Christian Kirk has now looked electric for multiple weeks now. Nuke has taken a back seat, but that's also been to matchups. Now, granted, Hopkins will probably see Tre'Davious White in this one, but we talked about this before the show. This is a banged up Tre'Davious White who hasn't been playing that great. And grown man DK Metcalf just absolutely abused him. Yeah. Right?
Is he banged up or has he got hurt feelings? Because I was just going to say that all this talk about matchups, and we had this conversation last week, and DK did his thing. I know White ended up with an INT late in the game, but I watched pretty much all of that game in the background, and man, DK is something else. We're going to get there, though. That's a good conversation to have in a minute here with Russell Wilson.
Also, Bills defense ranks 27th in fantasy points allowed on the ground to opposing quarterbacks. So they're giving up a lot of rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Kyler's just brings that to the table. So he's got what you need is a rushing quarterback, and you need two solid pass catching options. And you have that here. You've got that with both teams. So you've got Hopkins and Kirk now, with Kirk being back healthy. I think that's been the huge difference to this offense. And then you have that with Buffalo, right? So because with John Brown back, they certainly look dynamic. Now, we know Diggs is the absolute target monster, and we'll get into that at the wide receiver. His numbers are just absolutely gaudy at this point. But John Brown's back, is a deep threat, was also used as a short-term intermediate guy last week, was just racking up receptions, which really killed me last week. I ran so horribly, is that him getting tackled at the 1 or the 2 yard line when he could have got in for the touchdown. But not only that, he missed the 100-yard bonus by 1 yard. So I was on mega tilt there. Anyways, he looked awesome. And when he's rolling, then the Josh Allen can roll too. And also, Tua had great success, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns last week against this same defense. That's the Cardinals secondary, extremely thin and banged up. They've lost some key guys. They lost another guy to COVID who may be back this week, but we're not sure yet. But regardless, and then, they rely on Patrick
Peterson, man.
Peterson,
old man Peterson,
right?
now
but
he's getting older.
Who's getting older and is definitely not the shutdown corner that he once was, but he's still decent, but certainly not the shutdown that he is. So I just have a hard time. And I see this monster total. It's also this is played in a dome too, correct?
Yeah, Arizona.
Yeah. And so I just think this game is going to go absolutely bananas, and I'm going to be there for it with everybody else, which is the problem.
I think it's okay. I don't hate it. I got to see where I'll end up. You could still, again, look, I'm looking at their ownerships here. You call it 15 a piece. You could go 30 a piece, and then you still got 40% of your lineups to play with if you want to take some shots here. I do think, and you spent enough time on them probably. I'm with you. It's how you're going to be using them. Like you said, old man Peterson. I think Diggs can still get him, right? Diggs has just, been doing things at will. And it's especially better for Diggs when Brown is back. It helps Brown, it helps him, and it helps Allen. It's a win-win for that squad in general. I'll mix them up some, but I do like the Josh Allen side if everyone's going to go up and pay up for Murray there. So I might separate it some. I might go 20 and 10 and go underweight on Murray and overweight on Allen if I'm doing 30% of my lineups that way, or double it for 60%. That's the guys I like too, but it is interesting, the squeeze, right? The squeeze plays. Right in between, you've got Aaron Rodgers against Jacksonville, and you've got Russell Wilson against the Rams, who, I don't know how you could go down, go under on Russ here. And he's showing up right now, even after Goff in the ownership projections. And I get it. It's a $1,200 price difference. But the season that Russ has been having, what he does, how good he looks, I'm not really scared of Ramsey at all. Now there's actually talk. At first it was going to be Ramsey who's going to shadow with DK Metcalf, which I would have loved because you already mentioned it. Grown man DK Metcalf. It really don't matter. And they've talked about it, openly. They want to be this 1-2 combo, him and DK. Everyone keeps worrying about you got to flip-flop this back and forth. And if you can predict which game, I still say just play DK because of the fact that, he does have the off games. It'd be nice if you could predict every single game accurately. I think if you look at it, DK is just way more likely. They're just not going to shy away from that. He's too big. He's too strong, too fast, has the handles, everything for a guy that big. So I'm still in on Russ and DK. I like that side more. Lockett has the nice little slot matchup there. But now today's talk on Friday here, recording this, is that Ramsey's going to go with him a little bit more. And now he's going to cover both of them. Like, I don't think he's going to cover either of them. So you just have to figure out how you want to build your lineups accordingly. It's typically pretty tough to get Wilson, Lockett, and Metcalf together. But we've already just talked about all of these value running backs. The only worry I have is, them getting to their ceiling for all of them. Then it makes it a little bit tougher. But if Russ throws 4 and it's to them, that would be kind of what you'd have to see happen. So there's that. I already mentioned earlier, I like Rodgers and Adams. I think it's expensive for people to afford. But with, some value on the Jacksonville side, I think you could run sort of a skinny stack there with Rodgers, Adams, run it back with one Jacksonville player and go from there. So I like that. And, man, the other two up here, I know it's, I'm naming everybody at the top, so you got to play your own lineups accordingly. But I normally play like 8 quarterbacks typically. And, yes, I'm going with 6 from up here. But Watson, since the firing of the coach there, Brian, whatever, he's just been going off, right? If you look at his numbers, I'll go back here. I had him up just a second ago. He's got 24, 27, 35, 30, and 24 DK points in the last 6. Only one game at 281 that he failed to hit the 300-yard bonus. He's rushing for 25 to 50 a game and somehow hasn't rushed for a touchdown yet. I know that there's weather in this game that may worry some, but at 6,900 with his options, he's got who do I got here? Guys, you can use Cooks, Cobb. These are short pass guys. I like Cooks. Of course, he's got Fuller, but I'm saying if you are even worried about this weather, I'm not yet too worried about it. See how it goes come Sunday, but I'd still use a guy like Cooks who can catch a little 8-yard pass and just do just that. Let Brandon Cooks. He'll take it right to the end zone for this guy. And then you got Watson being able to run it in from inside. He hasn't done it yet. Meanwhile, getting 25 to 50 rush yards a game over the last 6. So I think he's got a lot of upside. And you already mentioned him. Talk to me about Herbert. That game looks amazing. It's him versus Tua. You could take Tua as well down there below. I'll probably have a few shares at 5,600. But Herbert has just been on fire. What's your takes on Herbert over there?
He's a fucking baller.
He throws the ball a ton, man. It's crazy.
And it's the easiest stack ever with Keenan Allen because the monster target share that he gets is just insane. And then also Keenan Allen gets the matchup this week too. So because although is Mike Williams banged up in this one? Is he injured at all? I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't believe so. No,
okay.
He's good.
Anyway, but so he'll have the tough matchup with Byron Jones or whatever, and the good corners that they have, and the real the place to attack Miami is in the slot, and so it just sets up too easily for Herbert. Plus, Herbert can do it all. He can do it on the legs, and this is a Dolphins team is gonna fade as we they overachieved last week and pulled out the win, but I expect them to start getting worse and worse, and they're getting a little bit more banged up. missing players, missing good running backs. Breda is probably going to be out again. I mean, they're back to who are they? They don't have who's my boy? God, I'm just masters on my head. The main running back who's out still for Miami. Come on, this is the easiest thing ever, and I'm just slipping.
I'm trying to think who you're thinking of here because Howard is supposedly going to be in.
He's the guy they have to use because of Gaskin.
Oh, Miles Gaskin. Yeah, I thought you were talking about Breda before, so that's why I was thinking about that. But yeah, no.
God. Took me like a minute to even.
We were all over him a couple weeks ago. Yeah, actually, I wasn't even thinking about that right now. I was thinking about Jakeem Grant was what was on my mind, but.
There's cheap passing game options for the other side with Tua. So I love Herbert, but like going back to Watson, so if you do like him, I guarantee you that by Sunday, he's going to be like, he's projected to be like a like a top 5 or 6 quarterback by ownership. I guarantee you by Sunday, it's just going to fall deeper because everyone's going to have that last Cleveland game and that weather on their minds. And they're going to see these 25-mile-per-hour winds, and they're just going to fade it. But if you're not worried about that, then his ownership is going to be extremely low.
Yeah.
So
it was Bill O'Brien, like I said, since he's been gone, butt chin there, he's been turning it up, man. He's definitely been good. And I just think there's other ways for him to get there still. And it's a little bit cheaper, right? It's 6,900 versus, 7,500 for Allen or 8,000 for Murray. Not saying he has the same ceiling, but if there's a way for one guy to level up against them, that's sort of where I would go. And then Herbert, you mentioned, just one more thing to add. I'm really laughing at this Keenan Allen price. We're not at wide receiver yet, but he was way too cheap. He has like a decent game with 21. They're like, okay, we'll bump him to 7K. He drops almost 30. And they're like, oh, okay, 7.1K. We'll move him up $100 more. It's like you said, I don't care about Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. They're good, but it's just the way they set up and how many targets and touches he gets. It's like a mini Hopkins or like a mini Devontae Adams at 7,100. So I'll definitely be playing that stack. I like Jakeem Grant on the other side. Just talk about ways to stack it up. I think that game is pretty interesting. And Tua's going to want to prove what he's got, man. He's going to, he's looked good so far in the little bit that we've seen him. So I think he's going to come out firing as well. And it's not like the Chargers have a defense. So I think this game could be pretty low owned overall when you talk about all the pieces combined for something like a game stack. And even Keenan Allen showing up at like 16, 17 right now could go up some, but Jakeem Grant, 12, 13, they're getting talk, but they're not getting enough, probably, in my opinion, based on what this game could be like.
Yep. And I guess the one cheap. So, all right, so I know you said the get rights. We both agreed it was a get right spot for Tom Brady, but do you really want to play him this week? You do?
I do.
So tell me why.
Well, it's like you said, the matchup, the get right spot. I think it was just getting things figured out last game. It obviously wasn't good, but also it's the Saints. It's a much tougher matchup what he was going up against. It was prime time. It's, everything that goes with it. Carolina is not good. They're down. CMC was the only life they have, and it never really. You look at the long term with him. He racks up the stats, but it never really helps him in the win column. And I just think they're just so much worse. And just think about who it is. It's Tom Brady. It's Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, who looked fine, and then Gronk is getting healthier. So you've got all those guys, man. And then you've got Ronald Jones, Fournette. Like, not saying these guys are good, but I'm just saying you have an offense that should be able to do damage. You have a matchup where you should be able to see it through, and he's only 6,300. So I don't got to risk as much. I definitely want to have him in there. There's not a lot I love. Like I said, I like the other guys, but go ahead.
He's got insane pass catching options now. So you give him another week of practice. He's got Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown. And so the reason I liked Tyreek Hill last week a lot, I liked Mahomes some. And everybody was saying how, you run against Carolina, that's the easiest path. But like that's the easiest path for most teams, but not for teams with like a quarterback at the helm, like that have that have Patrick Mahomes. That's a pass first team, right? So you know
Yeah.
that they were going to come in there, and you know that they're more talented, and that, like, this is still a poor defense overall. And you knew he was going to be able to do his thing. And the same thing, I would put the same thing if it was Aaron Rodgers showing up to Carolina. If it's Tom Brady showing up to Carolina, you know that these are pass first offenses, right? Like, so that's what they want to be. That's who they are. And you know that they're still better than Carolina. So I wouldn't worry about like running backs. If you think, so it just makes sense for Brady. I get it. But the problem is
it's
like,
something that go ahead.
You just know, well, you might get that 1 yard QB sneak for the touchdown. You might get that with Brady.
There's certainly the challenge of, yes, you look at the guy $100 more than him, Drew Brees. Not saying to play him. I just wanted to bring this up because I was looking at it earlier. He got 4 touchdowns last week, 4 passing touchdowns, had a great game, and scored like 23 DK points. Like, they do absolutely nothing else. I get that. There is, that piece to it. But I'm saying if you're going down in this build style, there's not a lot of guys around him. Herbert's a little bit more sure, and then more, another 600 to get up from Brady to Watson, and you keep going from there. But I think what you just said is like the thing that tilts every DFS player, myself, you probably included, is like, these guys don't care. They're going in, they want to win the game. They want to score points. They're not looking at it like, well, we know we've got this running back matchup. We should use these running backs no matter what. They go in, they say, we've got Tom Brady and all these pass catchers. We need to score the most points to win this game. Let's go do it. That's why you see Mahomes get it done, a guy like him, in 3 quarters or 2 quarters sometimes, because they just put their points up the way they know how. They're not looking at it. And everyone's like, well, man, I don't know why they're passing it so much when they have this great rushing matchup, because they don't care. They have no idea. They're just trying to score the most points possible. I think that's how Tampa Bay does it. We talked about all those pass-catching weapons that they have. The challenge is, for me, kind of like what you just said, but I'm still going to play some just because anything could happen. And then what if he gets like a quarterback sneak in there for one, or something that can happen? It is Brady. I think there's a higher possibility, so I like him at just 6,300.
Yeah, I'm starting to like him more because it's like that means a lot to me. It's like, what's the team's identity? And that's a passing team with passing weapons, and they're going to want to get them all rolling. This is a matchup they should be able to take advantage of. So he could absolutely throw for 4+ touchdowns in this game. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever. The question is how do you pick the receivers? But we'll get to that in a minute. Now, the only other, so I guess my pool, if I was looking at, so I won't go 50-50 on Kyler or Josh. I'll have some more ownership I'll throw in. So maybe I'll go 40-40 and 20 with the rest. But I would use Aaron Rodgers, like I said, Justin Herbert. Deshaun Watson is interesting because of the ownership for sure. And I do see the upside, like that you were saying too. Russ is there. Tom is there. And then the only cheap guy I think I would gravitate towards is, just the garbage time hero of last week, Drew Lock, who I just think he's not great, but I don't think he's that bad. And he takes a lot of risks, and he's willing to use his legs when he has to. He's getting, he's been dealt a bad hand with his weapons, but like Jerry Jeudy is now an absolute stud and open at will, and their chemistry is coming on, definitely improving, especially after, 14 targets, 7 receptions, 125 yards for Jeudy last week. He's got a banged up shoulder, but all quotes say from the coach, Fangio, that he expects him to play. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but there's, also has Noah Fant. They're getting healthier. Their options are better. Their run game sucks. Like Lindsey and Gordon are not great. I think Lindsey's probably better than Gordon, but regardless, I expect them to trail. These Oakland games just always end up popping off, and this is a guy who's just shown it that he just showed us last week that he can get it done in garbage time. So he's my last cheap guy that I'm gravitating towards.
I got 2 more down here, and I'm not, 100% in on these guys. These are just like flyers that I would take, and it's the same game. It's the second of a division game, but, Philly, New York, I think there's some plays in this game. For Wentz, guys are getting healthier. Wentz is 5,900. He's actually got some rush TDs of his own. He's almost like a mini Josh Allen for much cheaper. A lot of pass attempts. Definitely can throw on these guys, I think. At 5,900, he's interesting. And then Daniel Jones, 5,200 in the same game. Philly, you can pass on these guys as well. 5,200. Last game against them, he ran for 92 yards against them. The game before that against Washington, he ran for 74. He doesn't really rush in touchdowns, but then if you look at his pass attempts, he averages like 35 a game, right? So, this is a guy that we could see a little bit of upside pop. We're going to segue here anyway to wide receiver, but I think, a guy like Shepard, when we get to tight end, a guy like Ingram, these guys are decent plays this week, and we already said we like Sanders on the other side, so why couldn't you run that little 3-1 stack with Jones, Shepard, Ingram, run it back with Miles Sanders? I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And then also you got guys at wide receiver. If you want to run it back with a Philly wide receiver, this game could, you never know. The thing about the second division game is, and this will sound stupid because you think this is how every game goes, but it's not. I don't think it's always true. One team could just smash, but typically in the second division game, it's either a shootout or just a terrible defensive game because they've got it figured out or they've got angles that they're taking against the team. But I find them to be a lot closer myself, right? That's sort of how I look at it. So I think that if this game stays close, which I think it will, it's going one or the other. It doesn't need, if it's not going to be a blowout, I think that makes a lot of fantasy pieces enticing. And you could use either side of that. If you need the savings at quarterback, just drop down from Wentz to Jones, or vice versa. If you have some money, spend up if you think Wentz is better in those game stacks. So I will use some of that game as well.
Yeah, he's the next guy that I would go to. Jones.
Which one?
I'm all set with I'm all set with Jones. If he made, I mean, it wouldn't shock me, but it kind of would shock me. I was all over Ingram last week. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. That ended up helping me, but the problem was that Kelsey ended up going off without a touchdown by the end of the game. But it was just nice, the touchdown regression to finally come and get in the end zone for the first time for Ingram. But I can definitely see Carson Wentz, right? He can play terribly, but he can also play great. We know the upside that he has. There's more of a ceiling there than with Jones from a passing game standpoint. All of his options are back now. With not all out, Ertz is still gone, but Goddard is back. Goddard ran a ton of routes, wasn't utilized whatsoever in that game, but they've had much. I think they had. Did they have the bye, or it was an island game? Regardless, they had. I think it was a Thursday night game. So they've had 10 days rest. Is that right? Regardless, they've had a lot of rest. So I'm expecting Goddard to be fully healthy. And plus now, Alshon's back. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. We'll see. But Rieger's back. Fulgham has absolutely turned into a very good wide receiver one. Miles Sanders is back for this one, and we already talked about it in the running back portion that the Giants give up tons of the targets to the running backs, so that should help his numbers there. So I think I'm expecting the most of Miles Sanders' production to come through the pass this week, and that should certainly help Wentz, is what I was trying to say. I could definitely see that game going off to a certain extent. And the Giants have their weapons, or they're at least their receiving weapons are getting healthier. I don't know what's going to happen with Golden Tate or what the hell's going on with Golden Tate, but Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram are two strong weapons, along with Slayton, which we already know. So, that's more than enough to make this a competitive game and for it to potentially shoot out. So I can get on board there. But that's it. Nobody else. I like no one else.
Yeah, and I'm going to condense mine down. I just like to, bring up some points that people can go off of and try and mess with. I'll definitely be heavier on those 6 guys at the top that I mentioned, and then I'll sprinkle in some of these guys down below and just some certain stacks.
But I and you did Drew Brees. Drew Brees could absolutely get there again, especially with Michael Thomas back. So I could see that too. All right, let's. When
I look at his last week, he got 4 touchdowns and 23 fantasy points. That's crazy. He it's so hard for him to get to a ceiling now. I guess is the challenge. Could he? Sure, but it's What did he do for yardage? I didn't even look. Maybe that's why. I was 222 yards. But even then, the last 3 weeks, five of the last 6 weeks, he hasn't hit 300 yards. And then so even when he does throw 4 touchdowns, if he doesn't hit that, doesn't rush for, he literally rushes for negatives because it's the kneel down at the end of the game. So yeah, we can go to wide receiver. It's just that one's harder for me to see. I would try on Tom with these big weapons taking 70-yard touchdowns to the house versus some of these short catch and pass things like we have with a guy like Michael Thomas typically.
All right, wide receiver Devontae Adams is going to be projected to be the highest owned. Great matchup, but there's that shadow of doubt now with like Aaron Jones back healthy, game where they're close to 2 touchdown favorites, at home, maybe he doesn't have the monster game, but like you can't take away what this guy brings to the table. From a, let's see let me just pull up from like a target share perspective. He's number 1 in target share amongst all wide receivers by a good margin, at 33.5%. So 33.5% of the targets are going to him. So 70 targets on the season, 53 receptions, 675 yards. But really it's the touchdowns. He has 8 freaking receiving touchdowns so far. This, absolutely Rodgers looks his way for the end zone. So I get that. The guy I love, for 1,500 less is Diggs. So Diggs, if we want to pull up stats here, Diggs is leading in the league in receptions, 63, targets, 91, and receiving yards, 813 receiving yards. Ranks second in both total air yards and target percentage, only behind Devontae Adams from the target percentage. So he's the number 2. So basically, he's a clear number 1. It should help him with a healthy John Brown back, as there's room for both of these guys in a game that should have so many plays with, and that should be competitive, with the Cardinals. So this game should play fast, 56-point total. The only thing is he hasn't had the touchdowns, right? And so there's that caveat there with like Josh Allen potentially running them in, or just Diggs hasn't been the end zone guy. But there's also the potential for touchdown regression and a big touchdown game to come his way too. So I love Diggs, 7,500. I love this game. I've already said like him. Another guy I like a lot. I mean, you laughed at the price. I laughed at the price. It's Keenan Allen. It's just so easy. So I want to talk target percentages again. So it's going to be, I already know that's the top 3. Devontae Adams, number 1, Stephon Diggs, number 2, Keenan Allen, number 3, with close to 30% target share. And he gets the matchup this week in the slot. So the Dolphins have a good secondary, but the slot is handled by Nick Needham, who per Pro Football Focus has a lot of 69% catch rate, over 10 yards per reception. So this is a guy that Herbert just locks on, and he has the matchup this week. He's a PPR monster. His price is still completely fine. The only thing that was holding him back was touchdowns, but he's now scored. He's found the end zone each of the last 2 weeks, but like we're still gonna see a multi-touchdown game from him. So I'm gonna call that this week. We're gonna get a multi-touchdown game from Keenan Allen, and he's gonna go absolutely nuclear. Other than that, my favorite from there would be Terry McLaurin. I know he's up there in price, but this is another guy, at least from like an air yards percentage, where he just gets a monster share of his target share and air yards. He's a speed mismatch with anybody. You saw him, what he did to Roby last week which was kind of a fluke play, but busted one to the house, which I was excited I had him. Now the problem is his quarterback play, right? Like it's a tough to work with Alex Smith. But anyways, in the dome, I know Cardi's going to like that. I think he's been tweeting off some things about him as well. But I agree. So Terry McLaurin is like my number 3 guy that I like a lot. And then I'll let you, then you can get into Nuke and some of the other guys that you like best.
I still like Adams to the top. Like I said, I don't believe the ownership just yet. We'll see what happens. I get it, the way he's shown up and everything like that. And I'm not saying it's going to be low. I'm just saying I don't believe 30% yet. I think way more people gravitate towards Aaron Jones. Maybe it goes the opposite of that by the end of the week because people start talking about it thinking the same way I am. But we've seen it before with the Cowboys to start the season a couple times, other situations. So I like a little Hopkins in there. You mentioned Tre'Davious White being banged up. It doesn't really matter. Because Nuke, he's going to do his thing. Those two guys in between. So Adams and Diggs right now are projected to be the two highest owned on the slate, I believe. Yeah, they are. And you've got, Adams, who I love, but right there you've got Metcalf, who I already talked about. It doesn't matter who you want to put on him. I'm just going to play him. He doesn't have, if you look at Lockett, and I know we're game log watching here, but just to bring up some points, it's like 2 games that Metcalf hasn't had great games versus, Lockett has 4 games out of his last 6 or 7 where it's under 10 fantasy points. It's just he does have the 50-pointer in there that throws everybody off. But I'm still going to go with Metcalf and just continue to play him. I think it's a real thing. This is the relationship they have, what they want to do. We talk about it, grown man. Doesn't matter what's really happened. Last game they both made some mistakes, him and Wilson, and they still both had fantastic games. So I'm still going to go there. I like that he's $100 more than Diggs, who's going to be popular. Like you said, Diggs hasn't had the touchdowns yet, so they could show up, but it could be somebody else that shows up for them as well. They've got other guys there. So I like Metcalf quite a bit. We're both in on Allen. I'm in on McLaurin. McLaurin's kind of like a mini Allen, even though he's only $300 cheaper, but he just gets all the targets. Just like you said, with Alex Smith at the helm, I'm not quite as sure. And then I don't know what you're doing here with Kupp or Woods. I'm leaning Woods for the savings. I know it's only $300, but man, and I know it feels like chasing after last game too, but I'm kind of liking Woods a little bit more than Kupp. I did see some stuff posted out there about man versus zone. He's better against zone. Seattle plays a lot of zone. So I don't know. Maybe you could play them both, but I'm not as high on Goff. We didn't talk a lot about him earlier. So I'd rather just use one of these guys on the opposite side of my Wilson stack. And for me, it would be Woods. Where are you at between those two?
Yeah, I like them both. I'd be lying if I tell you I had a preference. I wanted to play Cooper Kupp. I mean, the targets that how did this dude only put up 25 fantasy points with 21 targets in his last game? But like when I see 21 targets, that just blows my mind. But like we already know that teams pass at the highest rate and probably ever against the Seattle defense. Seattle has a good run stopping defense, and they aren't getting a ton of pressure. And they're now going to be without Shaq. So I like both guys because those are like the 2 key cogs in this Rams offense is Woods and Kupp. But like I just see those targets, and I want to play Kupp. Plus he was was banged up a little bit with a wrist injury, and so I'm wondering if like that people will affect ownership by the weekend. I'm not sure what to make of that, how popular they're going to be. I'd probably take the one that's going to be least popular. They're both similar in price, but you can play them both together too. But obviously then I'd want to play Goff, and I don't really want to play Goff. So I don't know, man. I'd be lying if I told you I had a preference, but they're both like phenomenal plays.
What about this next range here? Keep going down because unless you want to talk about Lockett, I just sort of, made the case for both sides in that game, but I'm with Metcalf still. But Robbie Anderson sticks out to me right down here. First off, we know Davis is going to be extremely high owned. You can go Anderson, you can go Samuel, who we'll get to in a bit here. But if you look at Robbie Anderson, like targets per game have been insanely good. Catches solid, yardage decent, hitting the bonus here and there. But he has 1 touchdown, and it was the first week of the season. That's another one. I know it's Teddy Bridgewater throwing you the ball, so it makes it a little bit tougher. But 6,100 against Tampa, if you don't think Davis is going to get there and you do think Tom and the boys are going to go off, however they get there, I do like having Robbie Anderson at 6,100 on the other side.
Yeah. So he would be the Carolina guy I'd like most. It's basically just comes down to his percentage of air yards, which is close to 40%. Definitely this is a guy that they're looking to often. So Anderson is a guy with big play upside. It's a tough matchup for sure, but it's a way to get off of Mike Davis for sure and to have more upside, right? Like all he needs to do is get loose for one. DJ Moore would interest me a little bit, but like the guy that I always keep going back to is Curtis Samuel. Like he may pick up some of this rushing void, right? Like he's kind of the leverage play to me against Mike Davis. Because you could get it from both angles. He might get some of these rushes and gadget plays or a rushing touchdown, which he's done, but he's also a deep threat and utilizing the passing game. So, and he's coming on and on with each week as we go here. So, Anderson would be my preferred. Curtis Samuel would be the second guy. I mean, man, 9 targets, 3 rushing in the last game against KC. I didn't even realize he went for close to 30 fantasy points. I just looking that up now. But now 17, 21, and then 29 over his last 3 weeks. Yeah,
35 up this week.
I see a trend, and like I still don't hear him getting talked about. And he's projected to be low owned, and he's such an obvious leverage play here. So like, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. But like Robbie Anderson is an obvious leverage play too, and has more of that like monster deep ups, deep passing game upside. But of course he's a little bit more expensive, correct? Should be.
Oh yeah. And I mean it goes like this. It's Anderson 6,100, DJ Moore's 5,100, and then for $200 less you can just play Samuel, who like you said he's got in last week was 30 DK points. The week before was 21. The week before that was 17. And in the previous 2 weeks where it was 17 and 21, he got a rushing touchdown each week in the red zone. So they're using him there already. He could definitely steal Mike Davis's thunder in a heartbeat. So it's just another reason the more we go through it to, like we're not loving that play, I don't think, when you've got all these other options.
And another thing I'm just reading now, Curtis Samuel's matchup in the slot is the best of the bunch. This guy, Sean Murphy Bunting, has been getting torched and allowed 3 touchdowns in coverage so far this season. So, man, I'm writing this down. I'm starring this one as I'm going to definitely have a bunch of Curtis Samuel this week. And
who else?
I had no intention of that coming in. All right.
Yeah, it's a good play, man. There's other guys here though too. The Miami guys we should talk about because you got Devontae Parker, Jakeem Grant, both those guys there against the Chargers in that game. If we like Herbert as we do, you can run it back with one of these guys pretty easily. $5K for Devontae Parker seems extremely cheap, even though I know Grant's going to get the love here. But yeah, I still like Devontae Parker at 5,000 as well.
Yeah, I worry about Tua and his what he can really bring to the table in the passing game. I know he did have 2 touchdowns, but like I think it's going to be in like shorter yardage variety, and he's really more of a threat with the legs. Devontae is too cheap. I do agree there. I do also know that Casey Hayward is phenomenal, and not someone I want to pick on. But I think you got to go with a number 1 wide receiver that cheap as the preferred play, but I do downgrade him because of that matchup. But I mean these other guys' price is just so cheap. So I mean Jakeem Grant is min priced, right? 3K.
Yeah.
I mean he's going to be operating as a number 2 wide receiver. Did get 5 targets last week, 35 yards, but who's their number 3 going to be?
It is this team.
Who cares?
Sucks.
Who cares?
We forgot about Gaskin earlier. Now we're going through this again, and we keep thinking about it. It's Mac Hollins this week.
Yeah. Oh man, wasn't he on? He was an Eagle, wasn't he?
Eagle, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm not playing him. So, man, Jakeem Grant's definitely you should have some. He's explosive. He can bust off for a big play. I know he's going to have a better matchup for sure than Parker, but this passing game may struggle overall in general. But there are garbage points to be had, and the price is so cheap.
Looking at it, I'll probably play some Tua, Grant, Parker, because the thing about it is I know who to run it back with on the Chargers. Just put Keenan Allen on the other side. And it's so cheap, $8,000 for Grant and Parker. And yeah, but guess what? If they bust, so did Tua. So the lineup was garbage anyway. So who cares? Just throw that lineup in the
And
garbage
I
like we
mean,
do with so many.
you could do anything you want from there. You could put like, you could do
Yeah.
like Diggs and Nuke together, like you not have to worry about either, either the Josh Allen or Murray, and that, like you could just hope that they just eat all the passing.
If I
It's
run
all
it back with
passing.
Allen, I only got a flex spot left to use one of those guys. But I'm saying then
Oh
I can
yeah,
get
you're
two
double. Sorry, sure, you're double stacking. I was thinking
either
just
way,
like
we'll get to
Jakeem
tight
Grant.
end, but yeah, you can get a couple guys in there. I'm just saying or you can do that. Like if you're a single stack, that's a good point. You don't have to do it. Have Tua hit Jakeem Grant. They're a cheap combination. Run it back with Allen because he's going to get all the touches either way. He
And
fits
then
any game script basically, and then throw
throw
everybody.
Diggs and Nuke,
Yeah, I
and
like it.
that could
Yeah,
definitely be
definitely.
done.
Yep.
Yep. Other guys we've already touched on, like Brandon Cooks. Will Fuller is always a good play. I mean, I love Jerry Judy. I just think he's a athletic freak. I think you'll have some tough games, but I think he's on a roll after last week's game, and I think the matchup sets up well for him in this one. And I mean, it's just like, I just want upside. Like, so I love this like 5K range in DraftKings, like anywhere from like 5 to 6K upside receivers. And he's someone that fits the bill there. So I like that. And I like John Brown again. Like his price has gone up. So, to 5,300, but all it takes is one touchdown for him to absolutely get there in a game that I love. He's going to have the better matchup, at least on paper, depending on what you think of Peterson. So John Brown, I certainly find is in play again. Let's talk about Steelers. Um, we've already said one way. There are the Bengals are terrible defense overall, but terrible against the run. But so one way to play is James Conner, but the other way is with Deontay Johnson, who's priced reasonable and coming on strong. I don't know what to do, because it's always the three-headed monster there with Chase Claypool and Juju. And so do you have a preference on any of those guys?
Man, Claypool just keeps going. That's the thing about him. He's a big dude. They call him Mapletron, man, the Canadian guy. So I like
There
this
you
guy
go. There it
a
is.
lot. So I'm probably going to roll him. I do like, the price and the upside of a guy like Deontay. So I can definitely get there as well. But like I said, I like this game. So I'll have some pieces of this game. T. Higgins is right there in that mix at 5,500. If Mixon's doubtful, and most would think Bernard would be the next guy up, but I think that just leans Burrow to go to the guys that he trusts. And, it's been Higgins so far this season. Boyd's another guy you can use a little bit more, but Higgins is cheaper. So I like those pieces from this game. I would say it would be Higgins, Deontay Johnson, and Claypool. Those are the three that would stand out to me here. Juju's bounced back some, but I kind of like Claypool and Deontay more, price and just, opportunity aside.
All right, Mr. Tom Brady. You've already expressed your love for him. Who's your favorite receiver option with him? Is it Evans? Is it Brown? Is it Godwin?
I think it's Godwin, but with a side platter of Antonio Brown. I don't know. It just feels clear that he's not in with, Evans. I know there's some coach speak going around that, Evans is getting was open. Brady's got to figure it out, whatever. But guess what? Like I said earlier, everyone's going to want things to be found out. I think he's going to continue to go to who he wants to go to, who's going to score points for the team and for him. He wants to win. He just got embarrassed on national television against a longtime rival. Yes, he's got the plenty of the rings to, 5 up him or 4 up him, whatever the numbers are against them now in Super Bowls, as far as who has more. It's Brady by a mile. But I think that it's still important to him to bounce back. I think he's going to go to the guys that work. And so, I know that they're only a little bit cheaper, $300 cheaper or something. I think it's 6,300 for Evans, 6,000 for Godwin. What did, Godwin do last game? Not much, to be honest, but nobody did. And then what's Antonio Brown this week? He's
5,800.
Yeah, a little bit less there again. So yeah, I'm on Godwin, then Brown, then Evans. That's how I rate them out.
So the way I see it, as I say go Evans, Godwin. I say let Antonio Brown have his time to learn the playbook and they'll get him involved lightly, I think. And I don't think it's going to, how everyone was saying, oh, Brady's going to force it to Antonio Brown right as soon as he got him. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's like come playoff time, that may very well be the case. But right now, let him get his feet wet, learn the offense more, understand the playbook, and let him rip with Mike Evans or Godwin.
Yeah, mix them up.
Matchup.
I mean, nobody wants any of them. They're like 2% and 5% owned. But
Yeah, they're good plays. They're one of those guys is going to go absolutely berserk.
yeah,
Just like Tyreek went nuts last week. One of those guys is going off.
yeah.
So I don't know which one, but play one of them. All right. Anyone else that we're leaving off?
I don't think so, man. You can play. I guess the one other conversation would be Galladay out, but I can't get Amendola right if I tried. I don't even know if he's ever had a 20-point week, maybe one time. Like, I just don't care enough. And Marvin Jones hasn't done shit all season. So I'd probably play like a little bit to your point there on Judy earlier. I like him, but I feel like with the price going up and everyone following suit, I like Hamler, got like 10 targets last week. And also Tim Patrick is back. And, he was in the mix as well. And he can catch a long bomb or something there. That game, you never know what could happen. So I like that. He had 9 targets himself last week and a touchdown. So, and he's got like a 17, a 26, a 14, a 13 last week, like for as far as scoring goes, DK wise. I kind of like those guys for cheaper as ways to just get a little bit different if you are going to use pieces within that game.
So we did touch on it. So Galladay out again. You look at the last 3 weeks now, the trending upwards for Marvin Jones. Got a touchdown last week, 2 touchdowns the week before. Hasn't had a big yardage game yet. But they're probably not going to have tons of success rushing on the ground. I do like Swift, but it just feels like at this point, like Marvin Jones, people are so sick to their stomach with this guy, they don't want to play him. But like, if this was like right in the beginning of the season, he'd be absolute monster chalk now with Galladay out. Only problem is Patricia and, they just love to run, but they're probably going to have a tough time running against this stout Washington front like everyone else does, and should have better success through the air. So
he's like the Drew Brees of wide receiver. He gets a 2 touchdown game and still gets, 7 targets, 2 touchdowns, and comes away with 18. Like, he's so hard to get a ceiling out of. So I don't know. It's tough.
I mean, the Washington defense overall has been very good in general to both. But I still believe in this guy. I still think there's upside there. That's what I'm saying. And like, if his ownership is going to be extremely low, I'm not sure how much of a bump he'll get now with Galladay being ruled out. But probably
not
won't
too
be
much.
that
I think, like
much,
you said,
yeah.
people are more over the play than they are worried about who's in and out in this game, which is funny because on a chalky week like this, like we already talked about, where everyone's sort of on one game or one stack and all this, 2 stacks in that game, one game though, you should be looking for plays like this. These are the ways, make it stand out. Even within those stacks, you could plug in a guy like him and you're basically getting a wide receiver 1 in Marvin Jones for 5,200 because Galladay's out. And like you said, the only way to really get to Washington is going to be through the air most likely. So I don't hate it for that reason. It's just, it's hard to do. Right now, he's projected for 0.7% ownership, if that tells you anything. So, but again, you've got John Brown, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Sterling Shepard, I mentioned earlier. You got all these guys around him. That's the other reason that it just, who cares that he's, Galladay's out and he's getting untouched. These guys are all under 10% as well and right in the mix.
Man, I'd want to play some Tyler Boyd, but I wish he was a little bit cheaper.
You should play him.
He gets the matchup for against the Steelers, and that they're going to be a ton of passing attempts with Burrow because that's just what he does. So I can get there. Only other guys like down cheap, real cheap. I guess you could always go back to David Moore, even though he kind of had his game last week. But or on the other side, and this may be a Josh Reynolds week. At 3,500, I don't know if he's being talked about. I am assuming he probably will be because that's just natural thing to like look for a cheap receiver against this Seattle defense that just gets torched in the pass. So if he like the more he gets talked about, the more ownership, the less interest I'll have. But if like he's not getting talked about much, then he's someone I could definitely use.
Yeah, I don't hate that play either. Like you said, he's been getting enough work, and he'll get talked up some, but I don't think he's going to be like super chalk at 3,500 or anything. So I can definitely get there as well.
All right, tight end, which is easy this week. We just
Darren
play your boy
Waller,
Darren Waller,
the baller, Darren Waller. Yeah,
and
5,900.
and then behind him we use some Evan Ingram and we use some Goddard, and we call it maybe some Noah Fant, and we call it a day.
And I like a little Hawkinson. Don't forget him
Yeah.
this week. He's good. He's good to go now. I believe I saw in practice reports today. So that's another way to get to Washington with Galladay out. So I think that's the interesting play there.
Any cheap guy? I mean, we didn't even need to talk. Any cheap guys? I mean, so Austin Hooper is back, practiced in full, ready to return. We know this Houston defense is just horrendous. A tight end makes some sense here in this game. I mean, it's interesting, right? We didn't even talk about like Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt being back, but they like both have an insanely good matchup. It wouldn't shock me if one of them goes absolutely off just by like even with them sharing or splitting some of the backfield work in this game. Wouldn't shock me for one of them to go off, but it also wouldn't shock me for them in a cold game against this defense for a guy like Austin Hooper to have a decent game and get in the end zone.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Chubb earlier. That is one that I like. Remember, I was talking quite a bit about the Watson stack leverage up against the Duke Johnson stuff there. So I do think that's the guy I would use. Hunt is fine as well. I like that Chubb's back. I think they'll want to run him out there if it's colder weather, that sort of stuff like we just talked about. I think he'd be a good play in like game stacks and whatnot that you could use him there. And then the other guy you just mentioned at tight end is Hooper. He's interesting. A couple of the other cheaper guys you mentioned him earlier, and I liked it, was Dallas Goedert being ready to go here at 4,200 against the Giants. I think that's a pretty good spot start that you can use there. What's the deal with the Rams this week? I think with Higbee and Everett. Everett's like 3,100, so he kind of stands out a little bit. And then one other guy I had, who was it? Noah, you already said him. Noah Fant. That's a $4,900 is another guy just with upside. It's $1,000, sorry, cheaper than Darren Waller in a great spot. The Raiders used to be the funnel. I know it's the Las Vegas Raiders now, and a little bit different squad, but I do like that as another guy just to be different. Like I said, people are on Judy for sure. I know he's a little bit, questionable or whatever as it stands, but I think he's going to play, so I'm not worried about that. So it's going to be Drew Lock, Fant, and then you've got, like I said, Hamler, Patrick. There's other guys you can use in that game. So he would be the other one that stands out a little bit for me. Trying to think if there's anybody else here that I missed. You got anybody else? Oh, Gronk, I talked about earlier. I like Gronk. A little bit healthier in that game against Carolina. That might be it, though, man. I don't know. You got anybody else?
To me, it's like I just don't want to play all these crap guys. So it's like we don't have so Waller is just such an easy play because he's a wide receiver one. You're getting a guy that he's second in the league in targets, right behind Travis Kelce for in 72 targets, 50 receptions, second in both in the league. For amongst tight ends. So it's just easy. You get a wide receiver one. He's actually, didn't he finally, I think he's gotten in the end zone in 3 of their last 4 games. The Broncos have been giving up a ton of production to opposing tight ends. So he's just the easy preferred play. We don't have to worry about Kelce. We don't have to worry about George Kittle. So he's like the clear number 1. I'm back always on the Evan Ingram train. I just believe in this guy. Touchdown regression finally hit. He hit the end zone, and he's just still not going to get enough love. Philly has been bad against for production for opposing tight ends. He did see 9 targets in the game that they played before. He only had 46 yards, didn't get the end zone, but I think they're utilizing him better now. They're seeing, so we've now got 9, 10, 10 for targets in the last 3 games, as when we weren't, and that this is also a function of the offense getting healthier too with Shepard and Slayton and just opening it up for Ingram. as opposed to just everybody honing in on him and shutting him down. Because if you're going to let this guy work, he can do. He's an athletic freak. He can do damage. Yeah, his hands aren't the best, and he makes some drops, which will annoy you. But he's a beast. So, and his quarterback isn't the greatest, but whatever. But this is a good matchup for sure. His price is still reasonable. So to me, it's just real easy. Just trim down this tight end pool and make it real small. Although it's like, one of these guys like Tyler Eifert or somebody's going to get like a touchdown or two and get like lucky, and like you're going to end up needing them for like monster field GPPs. But I don't know. I don't like anybody else besides like that short Waller, Goddard, Ingram, maybe Hooper. I do like Fant, and that's it. I mean, what's up? Hunter Henry just does nothing.
Yeah, I was just about to say with him, because he's right between guy like Goddard and the guy you mentioned, Hooper, and he's the one that would be sort of that little mini slate breaker, right? You'd end up seeing it. I actually don't mind. I just wrote this down here. A secondary stack, it's funny you brought him up, I wrote down Jakeem Grant and Hunter Henry. Just put them as a little cheap secondary stack across from each other. Get your big other dudes around them because they're cheap enough. He's one that's going to pop off eventually here. We like Herbert. Not saying you got to stack him up with them. I just think you could have those two because it's like you said, it's, there's Waller, Hawkinson, Fant. I'm giving a couple extra with Gronk and Hawkinson there, but Ingram, Goddard, Hooper, and Henry. Like that's it. The rest, it's if they get there, they get there. And it's, is it going to really matter in the grand scheme of things? Because then the other, 8 guys in those lineups still have to be accurate or connected or correlated. So I'm good with the smaller tight end pool here just to make things make sense. But I do like that Henry Grant little secondary stack. That'll be my round out here.
All right, let's close the show on top stacks or top stack, whichever you prefer. Let me see here. I mean,
we know yours. We already know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be Mr. Chalk this week, so
yeah,
I'm gonna be eating chalk, and I'm gonna play the Josh Allen angle with Diggs and Brown together. But like that's still, you don't even have just one or the other. I've been doing all skinny stacks, all single man stacks with these rushing quarterbacks. But I mean, you can use both of them. But Diggs is going to be my preferred guy. I do like John Brown as well. I'm going to bring it back with probably Christian Kirk or Hopkins. I mean, this is as chalky as can get, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to make it less chalky. And it's probably going to be with trying to have a pivot off of Mike Davis.
Well, it's just like use Josh Allen with Brown. Brown is your Mike Davis, and then put Nuke in the lineup, and that's your Aaron Jones, and then go off of Aaron Jones and Davis at running back to whoever you want. You've named a bunch of guys that you love, and then jam up maybe the flex or the wide receiver. Boom, you've got a nice little setup there that's basically doing the opposite thing on both sides to be able to get yourself near the top, hopefully. So I'm going to be building them like that myself. That's just the way I could think about it. But for me, it's Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and then Robert Woods. Let's just say those three, for one that stands out quite a bit to me. I'm going to go back to Metcalf if people aren't. I like Woods over Kupp this week. I'm taking a stand there. And then I guess you can go down there. It would be the Brady stacks, right, as a secondary. Just you're going to have to mix it up. No way you're going to know which guy it's going to be. So if I am using Brady, I like using 2 wide receivers with him. He's unlike who you just talked about with Allen and Murray. They rush. Brady does not. So I will definitely have him paired up with at least 2 of those guys, and I'll just mix between Gronk, Evans, Godwin, and Brown.
And I will give you permission to use Leonard Fournette with him this week. Because
I was going to use Samuel. We already starred the guy and had everything. You're talking about his side. Sorry, Fournette.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to the Carolina side for a minute. Yeah, no, I'll use some Leonard Fournette, and you definitely could use them together. You're right.
And my other stacks, I'm sorry, you'll see, I'm going to have a ton of chalk this week, and that's just going to be the way that I play it. But, the Justin Herbert to Keenan Allen, bring it back with, I don't even care who I bring it back with, but probably Devontae. I mean, that's chalky too, but and then Drew Lock to Judy, and, as a way to, since I'm going to be playing Waller, Locke will add a little bit of differentiation because I don't think he'll be too popular. So those are my stacks. I know they're all kind of chalky this week, but I think they're all going to hit, to be honest with you. I guess that's a wrap. Good luck to everyone. Good luck to you. Now that we don't have Killer B holding us down, bringing us down this week, now you're going to be able to shine this week. Tambo.
The breakout. It's coming this week. This is the one.
This is the 4 touchdown game for Canada's number 1 DFS player. All right. This has been the RG DFS Tournament Takes podcast. Good luck to everybody in week 10, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.